Part 42. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 411. Swayan sneered, "You had no choice? As my maid, you betrayed your master, and you still say you had no choice? I'm going to teach you a lesson today." As she said that, she picked up the old teapot on the table and threw it at Shuiyao. Shuiyao dodged in a hurry. Swayan was even more angry when she saw her dodging, and she slapped her twice. Shuiyao had suffered a lot of grievances, and it was because of Swayan that she poisoned the heir to the throne. After being slapped twice, she was so angry that she started to fight back. The first time she slapped Swayan twice. Swayan covered her swollen face and glared at Shuiyao, "You slut, you dare to slap me." After a while, the two of them wrestled into a ball. In the dead of night, Swayan covered her swollen face. Because there was no imperial doctor, her cheeks hurt a lot, and her stomach was very hungry, so she couldn't sleep at all. Shuiyao sat on the other side. After the fight, both of them were exhausted. At this time, the sound of a woman singing opera came faintly from outside the house. Swayan shuddered with fear. She came to the door carefully and looked outside. She saw a female ghost in white clothes with disheveled hair. She screamed in fear. "Ah! There is a ghost." Swayan turned pale and ran to the bed trembling. Shuiyao was frightened by the scream and shook unconsciously. That night, neither of them dared to sleep, for fear that the female ghost would come to the door. The next day, a special eunuch came to deliver food. Usually there were not many people outside, but many people would come out at mealtime. Swayan had been hungry for a day and a night, and she was already starving. Although Shuiyao came to serve her, she could not trust Shuiyao who had betrayed her once. She went with Shuiyao to get the food. When they arrived in the yard, the others had already received the food. The young eunuch opened the food box, brought out a bowl of fish, meat, and side dishes, and said to Swayan, "This is for you." Swayan felt even hungrier when she saw the fish and meat, took the bowl from the young eunuch, turned around and was about to leave. The other women hadn't eaten fish and meat for a long time, and when they saw Swayan had fish and meat in her hands, they immediately became greedy. In the cold palace, there are no such rules. A few women with disheveled hair went up and tried to grab the fish and meat in Swayan's hands. Swayan has been spoiled since she was a child. How could she have experienced this? "What are you doing? This is my food, get out of here. Whoever grabs it will own it." "That's right, why do you eat fish and meat? We only eat cabbage and radish." A few women with disheveled hair, regardless of anything, snatched the fish and meat from Swayan's hands. Swayu had been hungry for a long time, how could she let them snatch her food? During the fight, she was kicked several times by several disheveled women and fell to the ground, unable to get up. She watched others snatch her food away, and she was so angry that she even cried. The eunuch who delivered the food saw the scene and left the cold palace with the food box. In the study of the East Palace, Qin Xiao told Xiao Jinyan about what Swayan had experienced in the cold palace. Today, she was beaten by others because of snatching food. Xiao Jinyan said coldly, "Let her taste the taste of living a life worse than death every day, don't let her die." I know. Qin Xiao took the order and left. Swayan poisoned the heir to the throne several times and was banished to the cold palace, which became a hot topic in the East Palace. At the same time, it also served as a warning. Even if she was jealous, she would not commit crimes against the wind. The queen also heard some gossip and learned that Swayan poisoned the heir to the throne. Her precious grandchildren were almost killed by that poisonous woman. What's more infuriating is that the dog emperor didn't tell her. After hearing the news, the queen immediately rushed to the East Palace. Qingying looked at the queen walking in front and reminded her, "Queen, walk slowly and be careful on the steps. The emperor is the same. He didn't tell me about such a big thing." He knew that my treasures Dao Tao and Susu, but he deliberately didn't tell me, the queen complained as she walked. Maybe the emperor didn't tell me because he was afraid that the queen would worry, Qingying said gently. The queen snorted, the emperor is not so kind. He doesn't do what he should do and sticks to his own opinion on what he shouldn't do. He always stayed in Fenji Palace these 2 days, no matter how obvious her refusal was, she was just pointing at his nose and asking him to get out. The emperor still did his own thing. Qingying had been with the queen for so many years, so she naturally knew what the queen meant. These 2 nights, the emperor and the queen had to fight wits and courage, and then forced to stay overnight. She heard it clearly from outside, and smiled secretly when she thought of the daily life of the emperor and the queen. The queen stepped into the Hehuan palace and walked straight in. Eunuch Ren didn't even bother to howl, and stood outside waiting, only Qingying followed the queen in. Crown Princess. Shen Shuwei came up to the familiar voice and looked at the queen, who was almost running, puzzled. Mother, why are you in such a hurry? The queen said, my precious grandchildren were almost killed by someone, how can I not be anxious? Shen Shuwei comforted her, Mother, the babies are fine, they are playing with the snowballs, you don't have to worry. I'll go in and take a look. The queen couldn't wait to go in, and saw a fence made of wood on the ground, and when she got closer, she saw that the fence was made of mats. Susu and Dao Tao were happily chasing the snowballs inside. Swichuan was very smart. He would look back at the little ancestors from time to time. When he was about to catch his tail, he would speed up immediately, making Dao Tao and Susu laugh non-stop. It's only been 2 days since we last met, and Dao Tao and Susu can crawl, and they crawl so fast. The queen squatted down in front of the fence and waved to the babies, Dao Tao, Susu, the queen's grandmother is here to see you. Susu saw the queen's grandmother and immediately gave up chasing Swichuan and crawled towards the queen. When she crawled to the fence, she reached out for a hug. The queen's heart melted when she saw Susu's actions. How could Susu be so cute? Grandma, hold me. The queen picked up Susu, looked up at Shen Shuwei, and said happily, Susu can say hold me now. Shen Shuwei said proudly, when I have nothing to do, I will teach the babies to say hold me. After 2 days of teaching the single word, the babies can say hold me now. The queen looked at Susu's sweet smile and said, the crown princess is still good at educating her children. I was not so good at teaching when I was young. When the crown prince was this old, he didn't even know how to call his parents. Shen Shuwei said embarrassedly, you are too kind, mother. In fact, children of this age can pronounce the pronunciations of mama and baba. It is innate. It is easier for children to pronounce other syllables if adults teach them more. For example, hold me, a very simple pronunciation, is relatively easy to learn. The queen said earnestly, I just heard about Swayan's matter. I was so scared that I broke into a cold sweat. There are so many intrigues in the palace that I don't know how many children have died. When the maid takes care of the baby, try to keep a distance from others. Shen Shuwei nodded vigorously, don't worry, mother, I won't let others hurt the baby. The queen looked down at Susu in her arms. She was looking down at the necklace on her neck, and her restless little hands also reached out, grabbing the emerald on it and playing with it. Look how cute Susu is, how can you bear to hurt her? Dao Tao's target has always been Swichuan. She hugged Swichuan and then raised her head to look at the queen's grandmother. She looked like Xiao Jinyan's phoenix eyes, stared at them for a while, grabbed Swichuan's legs and climbed to the fence. Swichuan could only cooperate and use its 3 legs to keep up with Dao Tao's crawling speed to avoid being dragged away. Dao Tao crawled while mumbling, Mom, hold me. Shen Shuwei saw her son crawling over and did not forget to drag Swichuan with him, which was enough to show how much Dao Tao liked Swichuan. She bent down and picked up Dao Tao, and picked up Swichuan at the same time. Swichuan climbed directly onto Shen Shuwei's shoulders and stayed there, just in time to play with Dao Tao. Dao Tao played with Sichuan's ears and whiskers for a while, shouting, "Mom." Sichuan looked confused. Dao Tao raised her head and looked at Shen Shuwei, "Mom." Sichuan. The queen looked at the two babies and suddenly had an idea, "Crown Princess, you should follow me to live in Fenji Palace, so that I can play with the babies at any time." Shen Shuwei was confused for a moment, thinking of the emperor, who would want to have an extra light bulb around him. And Xiao Jinyan, it's not good to let Xiao Jinyan stay alone in an empty room. She has seen Xiao Jinyan's ability after not sleeping in the same room for a long time. That's not good. The queen coaxed, "How about staying for a while?" Shen Shuwei was a little embarrassed to refuse the queen's proposal. "Tomorrow, the palace will send someone to pick you up." The queen had a good plan in her mind. If the crown princess stayed there for a few days, how could the dog emperor have the face to come and rub the bed? At night, Shen Shuwei told Xiao Jinyan about the queen's proposal, and he immediately refused it, and the reason was also very dignified. "The queen mother and the emperor have some discord recently. Wouldn't you disturb them if you go there?" "Ah," Shen Shuwei was confused, "what happened to the emperor and the queen mother? Did they quarrel?" Almost Xiao Jinyan nodded. These days in the imperial study, he often heard the emperor sighing and saying that the queen mother ignored him and was cold and distant after returning from Fueajug. "Isn't it a discord?" "Oh," Shen Shuwei asked Xiao Jinyan with a curious look, "how did your highness know?" Xiao Jinyan's eyes paused, and then he said seriously, "This palace is smart and can observe words and expressions. You, for sure, can't see it?" Shen Shuwei gave a thumbs up, "Your highness is so amazing. You can observe so much, but my mother invited me so warmly, and I can't refuse it." Xiao Jinyan pondered for a moment and said, "I will find a way." Shen Shuwei nodded vigorously, "Your highness is still thoughtful." Xiao Jinyan looked at Xiaju without changing his expression, and his eyes fell on her clothes. It was still a suspender skirt, with thin shoulder straps and a low neckline, which could not cover the beautiful scenery. "Every time I dress like this, how can I control myself?" Shen Shuwei was still wondering if my mother would be sad, and was thrown down by Xiao Jinyan. "Your highness. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 412. Shen Shuwei looked at the prince, who suddenly threw himself down with confusion on his face. Xiao Jinyan freed up a hand to put down the bed curtain, but his eyes fell on her. "It's already this hour, it's time to rest." Shen Shu breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that he was sleeping. "Then why did you knock me down suddenly? You scared me." Xiao Jinyan chuckled and looked down at the clothes she was wearing. The material was very thin, and she could vaguely see the alluring scenery. "Xiaju's clothes are very beautiful." Mentioning the clothes on her body, Shen Chu was a little excited and wanted to sit up, but there was someone pressing on her, so she couldn't get up, so she had to give up. "You think it looks good too?" Xiao Jinyan nodded and kept looking back and forth on her. "I designed it myself and Chengzi made it purely by hand." Shen Shuwei looked down at his body and pointed at the row of invisible buttons in front and said, "Look at the front, there is a row of buttons, which makes it very convenient to wear. In fact, modern times also have this kind of design, but here, she is the only one who has it, so there is no problem even if she designed it." Xiao Jinyan looked at Xiaju's cover-up and his eyes darkened. "It's very convenient." As he said that, he stretched out his slender fingers and repeated the concealment method that Xiaju just used. One button was not enough, and then the second and third. Shen Shuwei lowered her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan's actions. The more she looked at it, the more she felt something was wrong. She didn't realize it until she untied the last one. When the kiss fell, I couldn't think of anything else. At this time, as usual, the emperor ran to Fenji Palace after finishing his business. When the maids in Fenji Palace saw the emperor coming again, they all saluted. The emperor ignored it and strode in. He saw the queen packing the wardrobe again. "Queen, what are you doing?" The queen said without turning her head, "I am sorting out the wardrobe to make room." But in my heart, I complained about the dog emperor, and he came to rub the bed again. The emperor secretly rejoiced when he heard this. Is the queen not angry anymore? Clean out the closet so you can put my clothes in it? Queen, just clean it up tomorrow, don't rush it now. The queen said patiently, how can we not be in a hurry? It will be too late to clean up tomorrow. The emperor was secretly happy that the queen was so impatient. He came over, looked at the pile of clothes and asked, how about I help you? How long will it take for you to sort it out? The queen then looked back at the emperor and wanted to know what was causing his convulsions today. If your majesty wants to help, please help me move these clothes to the side hall. Okay, the emperor agreed readily, picked up the pile of clothes and went to the side hall. When he walked into the side hall, he saw Qingying also arranging her clothes. Qingying saw the emperor coming and hurriedly stepped forward to salute, "May the emperor be blessed with peace and prosperity." The emperor put the clothes on the table and glanced at Qingying. Qingying was the queen's personal maid. She grew up with the queen and knew the queen very well. Is the queen in a good mood today? Qingying lowered her eyebrows and nodded, back to the emperor, the queen is indeed in a good mood today. The emperor nodded happily, as long as you're in a good mood. The queen should not be angry if she stays overnight tonight. The emperor returned to the queen's chamber with a faint smile. The clothes are almost packed and it's time to rest. When the queen saw that the emperor had no intention of leaving, she knew that he wanted to sleep on the bed again. Isn't the emperor busy these days? The emperor chuckled, I have finished my work today, I will undress the queen. Because the emperor couldn't control the queen, he had to undress the queen himself. The queen patted the dog emperor's hand away and said calmly, I will do it myself. The emperor had no choice but to take back his hand and undress himself. Queen. After taking off her clothes, the queen lay on the bed with her back to the outside, out of sight and out of mind. The emperor also went to bed and lay down. Seeing that the queen didn't react, he moved closer to her. He moved 3 times until he was close to her back. Queen. Isn't it childish to play this game every day? When the emperor saw that the queen still didn't respond, thinking that she was in a good mood today, he turned around and hugged her into his arms. The queen's body froze, and after she came to her senses, she tried to struggle out of the dog emperor's arms, but the dog emperor held her tightly. Emperor. The emperor coaxed into her ear, Ling-er, I just want to hug you. It's been too long since I last hugged you. I haven't had a good night's sleep these days. The queen snorted, the emperor didn't sleep well. Is it because of my concubine? I won't bear the blame. The emperor said, of course it's because of Ling-er. Ling-er ignored me and made it difficult for me to sleep and eat well. The queen immediately retorted, I don't think so, I treat the emperor with enough respect. The emperor sighed, Ling-er, turn your head. The queen paused after hearing this, hesitated for a while, then turned to look behind her and asked in confusion, what is the emperor doing? The emperor looked at the empress' unpainted face. Naturally, it was not as good as when she was a teenager, but it was still very pleasing to the eye. He leaned forward and kissed her on the lips. The queen stiffened and stared blankly at the huge shadow in front of her. The emperor took the opportunity to kiss her, holding the queen's wrist tightly with his hand. After reacting, the queen cursed the dog emperor in her heart, knowing that he would take advantage of her. After the kiss, the emperor felt a little unfinished. The queen turned away with a cold face and ignored the dog emperor. If she was asked to turn around again, she would not believe it. The emperor is not very demanding, so he can sleep peacefully tonight. Early the next morning. Just after Shen Shuwei finished her breakfast, the people sent by the queen came. She was surprised at the queen's speed. The two babies were still having fun playing with the snowballs. After a little cleaning, a group of people went to Fenji Palace. Shen Shuwei sighed, saying that the conflict between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law is the biggest problem in the history of the ages. Distance creates beauty. It's just that the distance is suddenly shortened. Shen Shuwei has not experienced what will happen, so she doesn't know. When she arrived at Fenji Palace, she found that the queen had taken care of everything. The queen's bedroom is very large, separated by a thick curtain in the middle, with a bed and a small bed on the other side. In fact, there are other rooms in Fenji Palace. The queen thinks it's a bit far, so it's better to live next door. Shen Shuwei looked at the door curtain that was only half a centimeter thick. The distance seemed too close. The queen held Susu and asked Shen Shuwei, "Do you like this bed?" Shen Shuwei nodded, "I like it very much. The bed is also quite big." The queen said happily, "Just stay here for a few days and don't worry about anything else." Shen Shuwei nodded. This was the only way to do it. Otherwise, there was no other way. The queen suddenly suggested, "How about we have hot pot for lunch?" Shen Shuwei was so greedy when she heard about hot pot. "Okay, I haven't eaten it for a long time. I'm just thinking about it." The queen agreed immediately and asked Chengzi and Qingying to prepare the ingredients. The queen and Shen Shuwei played with the two little guys. The emperor returned to the Yangzin palace and asked Eunuch Li, "Has the queen been here?" Eunuch Li said, "Your Majesty, the queen has not been here." The emperor frowned, "Didn't she send someone to get my clothes?" Eunuch Li shook his head in confusion, "No." The emperor went to Fenji Palace with doubts. As soon as he entered Fenji Palace, he heard Susu's laughter. "Is Susu in the queen's palace?" The emperor entered Fenji Palace with doubts, and saw the queen holding Susu, who was grinning very happily. Seeing this scene, he suddenly remembered the scene when Yu was this old and was held by the queen. In a blink of an eye, more than 10 years have passed. I didn't expect time to pass so quickly. The crown princess, bring the babies over to play. When Shen Shuwei saw the emperor coming, she hurried forward and bowed, "Father." The emperor waved his hand to signal her to get up. He stepped forward a few steps to the queen, pressed Susu in her arms, held her small hand with his big hand, and asked with a smile, "Does Susu miss the emperor's grandfather?" Susu looked at the emperor's grandfather, dancing with joy, and muttered, "Daddy." "Daddy," the emperor looked confused and corrected, "Call the emperor's grandfather." Susu repeated again, "Daddy." The emperor patiently said, "The emperor's grandfather, not dad, the emperor's grandfather, do you understand?" Susu tilted her head and turned to look at Shen Shuwei, "Mom." The emperor continued to teach patiently, "Not mommy, but the emperor's grandfather." Shen Shuwei kindly reminded, "Father, daddy means father, and mommy means mother." I see the emperor was even more excited. "Call me grandpa." Susu blinked her big, beautiful eyes twice, "Hold." The emperor finally stopped saying something he loved to hear and looked at the queen happily, "Queen, you see Susu wants me to hold her, just hold her." How dare the queen say no? The emperor held Susu as he wished and began to make her happy. The queen took Dao Tao from Shen Shuwei's arms and told her, "Crown princess, go and see if the bed is soft." Okay, Shen Shuwei turned around and went to look at the bed next door. The emperor looked at Shen Shuwei's actions curiously, and found a bed behind the curtains. He looked at the queen in confusion, "Why is there an extra bed in the bedroom? We are an old couple, do we have to sleep in separate beds?" The queen couldn't help but roll her eyes at the dog emperor, "That's for the crown princess. I plan to let the crown princess come and stay with me for a few days." The emperor asked after hearing this, "Then why are you cleaning the closet?" The queen answered as a matter of course, to put clothes for the crown princess and the baby. The emperor was stunned, so he was so diligent in moving clothes last night, not because the queen wanted to put his clothes in. The queen was in a good mood not because of him, but because the crown princess and the babies were going to stay in Fenji Palace temporarily. In a word, the queen didn't have him in her heart. The emperor hugged Susu, looked at Susu in his arms with grievance, and whispered, "Your grandmother doesn't want Grandpa Huang anymore." Susu raised her little head and looked at Grandpa Huang, really didn't understand what he was thinking. "Daddy, Daddy. Daddy is what my father meant." The emperor immediately thought of a solution. After hugging Susu enough, he returned to the imperial study. Dao Tao looked at the back of the emperor's grandfather leaving. If she could speak, she would definitely say, "Grandpa, your grandson hasn't been hugged yet." On the way, the emperor asked someone to call the prince to the imperial study. Xiao Jinyan also happened to have something to find the emperor. Seeing that Eunuch Li came to call him, he strode to the imperial study. The emperor pondered for a moment before slowly speaking, "The prince and the princess are husband and wife. How can husband and wife separate? Prince, think of a way to take the princess back to live." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 413. Xiao Jinyan originally wanted to discuss with the emperor how to get the queen to release Shen Shuwei back, but the emperor put the responsibility on him and asked him to find a way on his own. It seemed like he was the only one who wanted to take Xiaju back, and his father didn't want to be alone with his mother and queen. What my father said makes sense. The queen likes the princess and the babies, and her son and ministers won't be able to take her back for a while. The emperor said angrily, "That's why I asked you to find a solution. The prince is so smart, he will definitely be able to think of a solution. As my son, of course he has to share my worries and relieve me. Otherwise, how would he have the opportunity to go to the queen's palace every night to coax the queen?" Thinking of coaxing the queen, the emperor felt worried again. He has been busy with political affairs recently and has not thought of an effective way. "Xiao Jinyan, you are still the king of a country. Just know how to embarrass my son." After the emperor pondered for a moment, he directly ordered, "I will give you 1 day to pick up the princess." What could he say? Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyebrows and nodded, "My son, I obey the order." After the prince left, the emperor stared at the pile of political affairs in front of him. Thinking of the queen's reaction last night, when did he have to be so careful when kissing his own wife? He sighed. Eunuch Li served the new tea and heard the emperor sigh. As the person who was waiting in front of him, he naturally knew something. "Your Majesty, today the imperial dining room made the imperial Buddha jumping over the wall. This is the queen's favorite dish." The emperor's eyes lit up and he ordered, "You personally jump over the wall and send the imperial Buddha to Fenji Palace." "My slave obeys the order." Eunuch Li accepted the order and exited. Xiao Jinyan returned to the East Palace. After Xiaju and the babies moved to Fenji Palace for a short stay, it seemed as if the entire East Palace was empty. His heart also became empty. Concubine Su came to the door of Hehuan Hall with cheerful steps, waving her handkerchief. When she saw Xiao Jinyan standing at the door, she happily stepped forward and said, "Your Highness." Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and glanced at Concubine Su. Maybe it was because she had a good relationship with Xiaju, but now she smiled a little more pleasantly. "The crown princess is not in Hehuan Hall. Concubine Su just came to play with the princess and the babies. What could she do if she wasn't here? The crown princess is not in Hehuan Hall, so where has she gone?" Xiao Jinyan said calmly, "The queen mother will take the crown princess to Fenji Palace to stay for a while." "Ah, Concubine Su curled her lips in dissatisfaction. Why did the queen take the crown princess and the others to stay for a while? All my fun was gone. Xiao Jinyan. I am more depressed than you. How can there be any reason for husband and wife to separate? When the emperor and Xiao Jinyan were depressed, Fenji Palace was extremely lively. On the dining table, in the soup pot, the hot soup is boiling, with a thick layer of red oil floating on it, which smells particularly fragrant. The queen pointed at the bones in the soup pot and asked, "Princess, what are these?" Shen Chu smiled slightly. "This is called a sheep scorpion. Even though it is just a skeleton, there is still meat on it. Not only is it meat, but it tastes very delicious after being rinsed in a soup pot like this." The queen also became greedy after hearing this. Shen Chuwei said it was delicious, so it must be delicious. Really? Why have I never heard of sheep and scorpion? What is sheep and scorpion? Shen Chuwei explained, the sheep scorpion is actually the spine of the sheep. It is called the sheep scorpion because it looks like a scorpion. The queen's horizons have been opened. Since coming into contact with Shen Chuwei, she has discovered a lot of novel and delicious things, and they have never been seen before. I see, no wonder it tastes delicious. Shen Chuwei used to eat sheep and scorpions often. She knew how long it took for the sheep and scorpions to be cooked. When the time came, she reminded, "Queen, when it is cooked, you can eat it." When the queen heard this, she clenched the chopsticks in her hand and couldn't wait to pick up the sheep and scorpions and put them into the bowl. Then she picked up another one and put it in the bowl to cool down, otherwise it wouldn't be enough for her to eat. I still learned this trick from Shen Chuwei, otherwise it would be easy to burn my mouth if I eat one by one. Shen Chuwei not only picked up the lamb scorpions, but also her favorite mutton meatballs and let them cool, so that it would not affect her cooking speed. The queen saw that the bowl in front of Shen Chuwei was almost full, so she also put some meat and meatballs to cool. The old man said that a 5-month-old baby can smell the fragrance of rice, let alone a 7-month-old baby. Susu's beautiful eyes stared unblinkingly at Shen Chuwei's mouth that kept eating meat, and she reached out to hug her. "Mom, Mom." Shen Chu took a moment to take a look at his daughter, and saw Susu dancing excitedly. "Mom." "Susie, dear, wait until I finish eating before I hug you, okay?" Changzi looked down at the Susu bar in her arms and smacked her lips, her beautiful phoenix eyes staring straight at Shen Chuwei's chewing mouth. "Master, do you want to eat Susu?" Susu is too small, and her intestines and stomach are not well developed yet, so she cannot eat spicy food. Shen Chuwei looked at Susu and coaxed, "When Susu grows up, you can eat whatever you want." Changzi couldn't bear to let Susu watch others eat. "My slave, go make egg cakes for Susu." Shen Chuwei reminded, "No salt." "My slave knows." Changzi handed Susu to her slave and went to the kitchen. I learned how to make egg rolls from Shen Chuwei, saying that they are best for babies. When Chun 11 deftly prepared the egg coupons and came out, Shen Chuwei and the queen were already full and sat there motionless. Seeing Changzi coming with egg coupons, Shen Chuwei waved to her and brought them to me. Changzi handed the egg roll to Shen Chuwei in confusion. Shen Chuwei ordered again, "Bring the baby over." Changzi had no choice but to hold the baby in front of Shen Chuwei. Susu, who had been craving for a long time, sat in Shen Chuwei's arms as she wished, but there were not so many delicious food in front of her. Shen Chuwei picked up the egg roll in front of Susu and pretended to put it into her mouth. Susu kept her eyes on the egg roll. When she saw Shen Chuwei was about to eat it, she hurriedly opened her mouth and took a bite. "One bite is not enough, reach out and grab it." Shen Chuwei let her daughter grab the egg roll. Susu grabbed the egg roll with her two little hands and stuffed it into her mouth. The way she was cooking rice looked a bit like Shen Chuwei. The queen was amused when she saw Susu eating an egg roll. Susu is good at eating. Shen Chuwei was non-committal. Dao Tao was sleeping soundly in the crib at the moment. At night, after playing all day, the adults and children all went to bed early. Shen Shuwei almost fell asleep as soon as she touched the pillow. After the emperor finished his work, he went to Fenji Palace and saw that the lights were out, so he had to return to Yangzin Palace. The father-in-law in the Jingxi room brought the green-headed card, "Your Majesty." The emperor was very upset, so he shouted sternly without even looking, "Get back." Here the father-in-law was startled and quickly exited holding the green card. Upon seeing this, Eunuch Li quickly left, and when he came in again he had a cup of chrysanthemum tea in his hand. "Your Majesty, the weather is dry and it is easy to get angry. Drink some chrysanthemum tea to rest." Upon hearing this, the emperor looked at the teacup in front of him, reached out to pick it up, opened the lid, and took a few sips. In the East Palace, Xiao Jinyan and Shen Shuwei had been sleeping together for so long and had never been separated. Suddenly they were sleeping alone and couldn't fall asleep. Staring at the night pearl on the bedside in the middle of the night, Xiaju would take out the night pearl and put it on the bedside every time they had sex. Xiao Jinyan sighed. He didn't know if Xiaju would be able to sleep when he suddenly went to a strange place. After the morning court the next day, the emperor was waiting for the prince. As a result, the prince didn't wait and Xiao Jinyu came instead. "My son, I would like to send my regards to my father." The emperor looked at his son with a disappointed look on his face. What are you doing here?" Xiao Jinyu said, "Father, it's been a few days since you promised my son and my mother to meet Miss Han together." Only now did the emperor think of going to see his son's sweetheart. In the past few days, Princess Suiyan poisoned Susu. He also wanted to coax the queen. The princess moved into Fenji Palace again. "I've been so busy lately that I forgot." Xiao Jinyu was secretly glad that he had taken a trip, otherwise his father would not know when he would remember it. Then, "Father, are you free tomorrow?" The emperor pondered for a moment and said, "Wait a minute, I'm a little busy these days, and I'm impatient and can't eat hot tofu. Do you understand?" Xiao Jinyu directly responded to what they had said when they urged the marriage, "My son and I are already 18, why are we not in a hurry? The other prince's 18 sons will already be in trouble." When the emperor heard this, he felt that it made some sense, "It's just that I really can't get away now." Xiao Jinyu continued, "If I don't rush to get married, when will I be able to have both children and a daughter like the prince's brother?" The emperor was stunned. "That will also take time." "You don't need time to do anything? If I get married one day later, your little grandson will come one day later, day after day, and there is no end to the day." "Father, do you understand?" Xiao Jinyu raised his voice and said. "Emperor." At the urging of his son, the emperor asked, "How about tomorrow?" "That's pretty much it. My father will continue his work, and I will take my leave." Xiao Jinyu exited the imperial study room with satisfaction. After leaving the imperial study room, Xiao Jinyu hurriedly returned to Qiancheng Palace to tell Miss Han to get ready. "I didn't pay attention when I was turning, and bumped into the person on the opposite side, causing the cake in the other person's hand to fall to the ground, and the person also fell backwards." Xiao Jinyu also studied martial arts, and his reaction speed was quite fast. He supported the opponent. When I saw it clearly, I found out that it was someone close to Grandma Huang, Wan Xian. "Are you okay?" Xiao Jinyu went to Sining Palace to pay respects to the Queen Mother, so Wan Xian knew him. She lowered her eyes slightly. "The daughter of the people is fine, thank you King Yu," she said, looking down at the pastries on the ground, squatting down, picking up the pastries and saying with regret, "It's a pity that the Queen Mother asked the women of the people to give this pastry to the Emperor of." Xiao Jinyu blamed himself for walking too fast just now. He also squatted down and helped her pick it up. "I accidentally knocked it off. If you go back and tell the truth, Grandma Huang will not blame you." Wan Xian raised her head and looked at the face in front of her that was 67% similar to the prince's. He was helping her pick up pastries seriously, which was completely different from the prince's indifference and alienation. It's a common girl who didn't pay attention when walking. How can you blame King Yu? It was the first time that Xiao Jinyu met such a good-tempered and considerate woman. It's obvious that I accidentally bumped into you and knocked over the pastry. Forget it, I'll take you back. Wan Xian shook her head. There's no need to trouble King Yu. The daughter of the people can go back by herself. Xiao Jinyu said, no trouble, I am just going to pay my respects to Grandma Huang. After hearing this, Wan Xian no longer refused, and the two returned to Sining Palace together. The emperor waited for a cup of tea in the royal study, but when he didn't see the prince coming, he couldn't help but feel a little restless. Eunuch Li, go and call the prince over. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 414. Yes, Eunuch Li received the order and went to the East Palace to find the prince. At this time, Xiao Jinyan was rushing to the imperial study and met Eunuch Li on the way. Eunuch Li saw Xiao Jinyan and hurried forward to urge, Your Highness, the emperor is waiting in the imperial study. Yes, Xiao Jinyan strode towards the imperial study. Just when the emperor was getting impatient, Xiao Jinyan stepped into the imperial study. Father. When the emperor saw the prince coming, he asked, Have you thought of a solution? Xiao Jinyan said, Father, the autumn hunting will be in a few days. You can take the mother with you, and I will also take the crown princess. The emperor immediately understood what the crown prince meant when he heard it. When going to the autumn hunting, the queen would not live in the same tent with the crown princess, and of course she would live with him. In addition, the queen herself was born in a family of military generals and was good at riding and shooting. Going out hunting might make her feel better. He should have thought of this earlier. This is a good idea, but we have to wait a few days. Xiao Jinyan knew that he had to wait a few days, and he also wanted to pick him up immediately, but his mother would not agree. The autumn hunting had been prepared long ago, and Xiao Jinyan was in charge. The emperor would also take time to go to Fenji Palace for meals, see the queen, and then see his precious granddaughter. The emperor hugged Dao Tao for a while, then hugged Susu, and found a problem. He came to the queen and looked at the queen who was lowering her head and sewing clothes and ignoring him. Queen, Susu seems to be heavier than her brother. The queen paused, raised her head and looked at Susu in the dog emperor's arms, and then looked at Dao Tao. In comparison, Susu's little face was obviously rounder than her brother's. Maybe it's because Susu can eat more than her brother, so she's heavier. Since Susu was born, she has eaten 2 more meals of milk than her brother every day. The emperor said happily, being able to eat is a blessing, a good thing. The queen also nodded in agreement. The emperor thought of the autumn hunting, so it would be better to mention it to the queen in advance. Empress, the annual autumn hunting will be held in 2 days. I want to take you with me. What do you think? The queen was instantly excited when she heard this, but she thought of her current bad relationship with the dog emperor, so she pretended to be indifferent and said, Why did the emperor suddenly think of taking me to the autumn hunting? The emperor sat down on the chair opposite the queen and let Susu sit on his lap. Susu had fun playing with the dragon pendant on the emperor's body. The queen has been in the palace for so many years and has rarely had the opportunity to go out. All of this is my fault. I didn't think it through. So I want to take this opportunity to take the queen out hunting to relax. The queen hasn't ridden and shot for a long time. The queen was very much looking forward to it. She has always been good at riding and shooting. Since she became the crown princess, she has no chance. On the surface, she was trying to make peace with herself. I will obey the emperor's orders, of course. The emperor saw that the queen agreed, and said happily, then it's settled. I have asked someone to order a riding suit for you. You can try it when the time comes. The queen saw Shen Shuwei holding Dao Tao and suddenly asked, "What about the crown princess?" The emperor paused after hearing this, feeling a little dissatisfied. Why did the queen always pay attention to others? The crown princess, of course the crown princess is accompanied by the prince. Crown princess, don't worry, the prince will take her. The queen nodded and lowered her head to continue sewing clothes. Shen Shuwei had been to the autumn hunting, but she couldn't go last year because she was pregnant, which made her regret for a long time. After hearing the chat between the emperor and the queen, Xiao Jinyan should take her, so she doesn't have to worry about not being able to go. I can roast all kinds of game again, hee hee. Asterisk. Xiao Jinyu chatted with the queen mother in the Sinning palace for a while. When she stood up to leave, the queen mother said, "Wangzhen, go and see Prince Yu off." Wangzhen took a few steps forward, wanting to see Xiao Jinyu off. Xiao Jinyu looked at Wangzhen and politely refused, "No, you just stay and serve the queen mother." Wangzhen said softly, "Prince Yu, I will just see you to the door." It was only a few dozen steps from here to the door, and it would be there in a short while. Xiao Jinyu nodded when she thought of this. Wangzhen smiled lightly, "Prince Yu, let's go." "Okay." Xiao Jinyu walked out first, and Wangzhen followed behind. Wangzhen looked up at Xiao Jinyu and smiled, "Prince Yu is very different from the prince I imagined." It was the first time Xiao Jinyu heard someone say this about herself, and she couldn't help but be curious, "Really? What's the difference?" Wangzhen smiled and said, "Prince Yu doesn't have the airs of a prince, it's easy for people to get close to him, and Prince Yu is very careful and gentle, which other princes don't have." Xiao Jinyu was a little embarrassed to hear this and said, "I didn't realize that I have so many advantages." "Prince Yu gives me the feeling that he is more like the big brother next door." After Wangzhen finished speaking, she asked carefully, "Prince Yu won't be angry if I say this?" Xiao Jinyu shook her head, "How could that be? That's your feeling, not true." Wangzhen. When they reached the door, Xiao Jinyu asked Wangzhen to go back, and she left the Sinning palace directly. Wangzhen stood under the porch, watching Xiao Jinyu's back as he left, smiled, and turned to go in. When the queen mother saw Wangzhen coming back, she took her hand and asked, "What do you think of Prince Yu?" Wangzhen smiled and said, "I think Prince Yu is very good. He is humble and has a good temper. Prince Yu is indeed not arrogant, and he hasn't married yet, and he doesn't even have a concubine." The queen mother said this, staring at Wan Xian, "How about marrying you to Prince Yu?" Wan Xian said shyly, "Queen mother, I only have the queen mother as my relative in this world, so I naturally have to listen to her. But, can Prince Yu like me? You are so gentle and considerate, which man doesn't like you? I just saw that Prince Yu still has some feelings for you, otherwise why would he be afraid of you being punished and send you back personally?" The queen mother laughed as she spoke, feeling that she was very powerful and saw through Yu's thoughts at a glance. Wan Xian said shyly, "Then I will listen to the queen mother." The queen mother has lived to such an old age, and she can guess Wan Xian's actions. She is very willing. That's good, that's good. Asterisk. Concubine Su has been cooped up in the East Palace for 2 days. Without Shen Shuwei and the babies, she is simply living a miserable life. Finally, she couldn't hold it in any longer and dragged Tao Liangyuan to Fenji Palace. "It's not appropriate for us to go to Fenji Palace so rashly, right?" Tao Liangyuan said with some concern. "Why is it inappropriate? We haven't paid respects to the queen and the crown princess for so long. Of course, we should take the initiative to pay respects," Concubine Su said as a matter of course. Tao Liangyuan was stunned when she heard it. "It seems to make sense." Concubine Su said proudly, "Of course what I said makes sense." The two came to Fenji Palace, and after being notified, they followed Eunuch in. Shen Shuwei learned that concubine Su and Tao Liangyuan were here, and she came out with Susu in her arms. Concubine Su, Tao Liangyuan, you are here. Crown Princess, I'm almost suffocating to death, no, I'm almost missing you to death. Concubine Su looked at Susu in Shen Shuwei's arms and stretched out her hand to hug her. Susu, godmother, can you hug me? Susu was very polite and stretched out her hand to hug her. Concubine Su happily hugged Susu, and seeing the little one laughing happily, she couldn't help but laugh along. Tao Liangyuan held Susu's little hand. Susu is really more and more adorable the more you look at her. Concubine Su said proudly, of course, don't you see whose goddaughter she is? Tao Liangyuan suppressed her laughter and joked, Susu looks like the crown princess. The autumn hunting will be in a few days, do you want to go together? Shen Shuwei just felt that it would be boring for them to stay in the palace all the time, so why not go to the autumn hunting together to get some fresh air? Of course I want to go, I haven't been there yet. If it weren't for Susu in her arms, concubine Su would have jumped up excitedly. Then she found another important question, will His Highness take us? It feels so difficult. Tao Liangyuan actually wanted to go very much, but she was afraid that His Highness would not let them go. Shen Shuwei was stunned for a moment, I think so, he used to take Chang Liangyuan. The queen saw the scene from a distance, and the three of them talked and laughed, not at all artificial and hypocritical, and laughed very sincerely. These are hard to see in the palace. At the same time, I envy them. When the prince favors the princess, Su and Tao Liangyuan can still treat the princess sincerely, which is rare. After Su and Tao Liangyuan left, Shen Shuwei went to find Xiao Jinyan. When she appeared in the study, Xiao Jinyan was a little surprised. Xiao Ju missed him too much, so he came to find him on purpose. Shen Shuwei came to the desk and glanced at the memorial in front of him, Your Highness. Xiao Jinyan raised his phoenix eyes and looked at her, Xiao Ju, what are you doing? Shen Shuwei walked around the desk, took Xiao Jinyan's hand, and said with a bit of coquettishness, Your Highness, I have something to tell you. Xiao Jinyan looked at her hesitant look, probably wanting him to take her back. What's the matter? Tell me. Shen Shuwei asked, Your Highness, are we going to go hunting together in autumn? Xiao Jinyan was a little disappointed, but nodded. She was not curious about her knowing, because her father would definitely go to see her mother, and Xiaju would know naturally. Shen Chu smiled and came over, then how about we take concubine Su and Tao Liangyuan with us? They haven't left the palace for a long time, and they are almost bored in the palace. Xiao Jinyan snorted, you think of them for everything good. Shen Shuwei said, good is mutual. They treat me well, and I will not forget them when there is good, right? Xiao Jinyan nodded, that makes sense, I can promise you. Shen Shuwei was happy, holding Xiao Jinyan's handsome face and kissing him. Just as she was about to leave, a big hand grabbed the back of her head, and then deepened the kiss. Xiao Jinyan hadn't been intimate with Xiaju for a few days, and he took the initiative to kiss her, so how could he let go? Shen Shuwei, who was confused by Qin, found herself being held in Xiao Jinyan's arms and sitting on him after she regained consciousness. Xiao Jinyan whispered in her ear, Xiaju, you are such a pain in the ass. Shen Shuwei's face flushed, and she looked confused, why did I become a pain in the ass? Xiao Jinyan picked her up horizontally, stood up, and walked straight to the bed behind him. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 415. Out of instinct, Shen Shuwei put his arms around Xiao Jinyan's neck and looked at his actions in confusion. When she came behind the screen and was laid flat on the bed by Xiao Jinyan, she became even more confused. Aren't you reviewing the memorial? Why did you suddenly pick her up? Shen Shuwei knew that the bed behind the screen was where Xiao Jinyan rested when he was tired from work. I think she really wanted to lie on it and take a nap. Your Highness, it's not nap time yet, Are you going to take a nap? Xiao Jinyan lowered her eyes, her little face was full of doubts, and she laughed out loud. If I want to take a rest, do I still have to wait for the time? Shen Shuwei thought about it and it was right. The prince wanted to take a rest, who dared to stop him? It just so happened that she also planned to take a nap. Then I will make room for your highness, Shen Shuwei said and moved inside, but Xiao Jinyan held her body down and could not move an inch. Your highness. Xiao Jinyan looked at her steadily. You don't need to make room for me, I don't need it. Shen Shuwei subconsciously thought that Xiao Jinyan did not intend to take a nap. Then I won't take a nap anymore. I'll go find concubine Su and Tao Liang Yuan and tell them that they can go hunting together in Kaiwei. At this time, you are still thinking about someone else, or two people. Xiao Jinyan said, you are the crown princess. You haven't noticed the slightest bit of what I am thinking. I am not a roundworm in His Highness's stomach, how can I know what His Highness is thinking? Shen Shuwei paused at this point. On the contrary, your highness is like a roundworm in other people's stomachs, and can guess what others are thinking. Xiao Jinyan was startled. Could it be that he was too obvious? Xiaju actually guessed it? You are the only one with a poor mouth. Shen Chu said slightly unconvinced, I am just telling the truth. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at her. Xiaju taught me how to unbutton my buttons 2 days ago. I will practice again today. Practice makes perfect. By the time Shen Shuwei reacted, Xiao Jinyan had already taken action. Your Highness, it's broad daylight now. Who said it's not allowed in broad daylight? Xiao Jinyan kissed her and continued to practice how to unbutton the buttons. This invisible button is really convenient. Shen Chu was slightly stunned. It seems that there is no such rule, but... Xiao Jinyan blocked her mouth directly. He didn't want to waste time on this. In the end, Chengzi went to inform concubine Su and Tao Liang Yuan. Shen Shuwei lay on the couch and was too lazy to move, watching Xiao Jinyan standing beside the bed slowly getting dressed. Xiao Jinyan thought about the pile of memorials on the desk that needed to be dealt with, otherwise he wouldn't have asked for them once. Seeing Xiao Ju staring at him, he said, go to sleep when you feel sleepy. Shen Chu shook his head slightly, I have to go back to Fenji Palace, the babies are still waiting for me. Xiao Jinyan had no choice but to let her go. Fortunately, she was not bullied too harshly today and she could still walk without any problem. Oh well. Shen Shuwei continued to watch Xiao Jinyan get dressed. Xiao Jinyan glanced at the man who said he wanted to go back but was lying motionless. Aren't you in a hurry to go back? Shen Chu said slightly, can't I take a rest for a while? Xiao Jinyan, of course, you can rest as long as you want. That's pretty much it. Shen Shuwei actually wanted to sleep for a while, but she had to go back. After Xiao Jinyan was dressed, he returned to the desk and continued to deal with unfinished business. Shen Shuwei rested on the couch for a while, then slowly put on her clothes. When putting on the clothes underneath, she looked at a row of invisible buttons and wondered whether it was easier for herself to put on or for Xiao Jinyan to take off. After slowly putting on her clothes, Shen Shuwei walked out from behind the screen. Looking at Xiao Jinyan who continued to be busy, she walked over. Your Highness, I have left. Xiao Jinyan raised his head and looked at Shen Shuwei in his busy schedule. Well, on the day of hunting in Kaiwei, I will personally pick you up. Shen Shuwei didn't refuse, the concubine is waiting for His Highness in Fenji Palace. After saying that, he waved his hand, turned around and walked out of the study. Xiao Jinyu returned to Changjian Hall and saw Miss Han sprinkling water on the flowers, so she walked over happily. Miss Han, my father said that I will see you tomorrow. Miss Han put down the kettle in her hand, turned to look at Xiao Jinyu, leaned close to him and smelled it. Xiao Jinyu looked at Miss Han's strange behavior and thought he was getting nervous about meeting his parents-in-law. Miss Han, are you nervous? Miss Han raised her head and stared at him with cold eyes. Why do you smell like something? I didn't use rouge and gouache again, how could there be a fragrance? Xiao Jinyu raised his hand and smelled it, as if he smelled a hint of fragrance. Maybe it was because I got a little closer to Miss Wan Xian and got it. Miss Han's eyes darkened. You are actually so close to another woman. Xiao Jinyu explained, I went to pay my respects to Grandma Huang. It is inevitable that I won't do it next time. Miss Han said with a cold face, go and change your clothes quickly, it smells terrible. I'll change it right away. Xiao Jinyu smiled to please him. When he turned around, he smelled it again, doubt flashing in his eyes. It didn't smell bad. At night, concubine Su was so excited that she couldn't sleep when she thought that she would be able to leave the palace in 2 days. I haven't left the palace for a long time, and I am still hunting in autumn. Concubine Su suddenly jumped up from the bed, feeling a little distressed. I don't have a riding outfit yet, and it's too late to make one now. The more I thought about it, the less I could sleep. As time went by, I felt a little thirsty. She lifted the quilt and got up, went to the table, poured herself a cup of tea and drank it. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a figure outside the window. She stopped drinking tea and suddenly opened her eyes. Could it be that the man in black was coming? Thinking of this possibility, she put down the teacup in her hand and walked over quickly. When she came to the window, she opened it suddenly, feeling a bit cool when the night breeze came. She stuck her head out and looked around. It was pitch black and there was no one. She looked confused. I clearly saw the figure of the man in black just now, why not? At this time, there was a person sitting on the roof above her head, that person was the man in black. Concubine Su shouted out in a low voice without giving up, I know you are coming. If you don't show up, you will be a puppy. Man in black. Concubine Su frowned. Could it be that she had really seen it wrong? She sighed and was about to close the window when a slender figure suddenly flashed in front of her, blinding her. The man in black always wears night clothes every time he appears, but with his slender figure, well-proportioned body and excellent temperament, coupled with that face, he is undoubtedly a handsome man. She was surprised and happy, so you are really here, why don't you show up? Do you have to make me say you are a puppy before you show up? Man in black, what are you doing up at midnight? Concubine Su snorted, aren't I happy? The man in black also snorted, I'm just poor and happy. Concubine Su said dissatisfied, who said I am poor and happy? My family is very rich, how can I be poor and happy? The man in black held his forehead and said, I told you to study more, but you have to go see the pigs. Concubine Su always felt that the man in black in front of her looked down on her. What do you mean? My family doesn't raise pigs. Man in black, I'm tired of talking to idiots. Concubine Su glared at the man in black, did I provoke you? Do you think I'm stupid? My mother always praises me for being smart. As he spoke, he looked the man in black up and down, that's right, your eyesight is not very good. The man in black was too lazy to argue with her, otherwise he would be mad to death. She thought she was sleeping. Then why are you happy? Concubine Su said, Your Highness agreed to take us to participate in the autumn hunting. Isn't it worth being happy? The man in black then remembered that there was an annual autumn hunting in Great Xia. No wonder Concubine Su was so happy because she could leave the palace. I've become an old girl and I'm still so happy. A woman hates being called old the most, and Concubine Su is no exception. Concubine Su said angrily, why am I old? A woman of 18 is like a flower, do you understand? The man in black said oh meaningfully, it turns out that you are in your double 9th year this year. Only then did Concubine Su realize that she had been tricked. Today is the day agreed to meet Miss Han, and the location is set at Fenji Palace. Early in the morning, the queen pulled the princess and said, you are actually wants to get married. Shen Chu looked at the queen in confusion, mother, King Yu wants to get married, isn't the queen happy? It's not that she's unhappy, it's mainly because Miss Han's figure is too outstanding. The queen looked Shen Shuwei up and down. It would be great if she was like you. Shen Shuwei looked down at his figure and felt good about himself. But now King Yu has surpassed Miss Han. Miss Han has been following King Yu for more than 2 years. Yu has a simple mind. I have only met Miss Han once and don't know the details. I am a little worried, the queen said worriedly. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 416. Xiao Jinyu is indeed simple, kind-hearted, and takes great care of her sister-in-law. Unlike Xiao Jinyan, who is very sinister. Shen Shuwei thought that he had an unknown origin, right? If the crown prince and queen were informed, they would probably have the same reaction. However, Xiao Jinyu had been pampered since childhood and was the empress's treasure. It was normal for the empress to be so cautious. At this time, Qiancheng Hall. Xiao Jinyu asked the Shanghai bureau to order a set of beautiful and elegant dresses early in the morning. The lake green dress goes well with Miss Han's snow-white skin. Her hair has always been simple and elegant, with a peach blossom hairpin in her dark hair. Xiao Jinyu looked at the peach blossom hairpin and felt it was too plain. He took out an emerald hairpin from the jewelry box and came to Miss Han. The peach blossom hairpin on your head is too plain. This hairpin was customized by Gozeo Si. It's very beautiful and matches your clothes. I'll put it on for you. Miss Han lowered her eyes and looked at the hairpin set with emeralds in his hand. It was indeed the craftsmanship of the royal craftsman. Both the workmanship and the details were handled perfectly, which was unmatched by street vendors. No need, just a peach blossom hairpin. When Xiao Jinyu heard this, he thought she didn't like it and gave up. Then let's go, we can't let my father wait for us. Although Xiao Jinyu was pampered and raised by the emperor, he continued to be pampered and spoiled, and sometimes lost his temper in front of the emperor. But for the most part, Xiao Jinyu still respected his father. Miss Han nodded, yes. Xiao Jinyu took her all the way to Fenji Palace. On the way, he did not forget to comfort her. My mother's descendant is very kind, and she gets along very well with my sister-in-law, so you don't need to be nervous. As for my father, although he can be a bit fierce at times, he is still a very good person, so you don't have to be afraid. Miss Han listened quietly, and then replied, with King Yu here, I won't be afraid. When these words reached Xiao Jinyu's ears, it was Miss Han's trust and dependence on him. You are right to think so. As the saying goes, my father, the queen, and my queen have always loved me the most, so they will not treat you poorly. Miss Han nodded when she heard this. When he stepped into Fenji Palace, Eunuch Ren went in to report. The queen and Shen Shuwei also stopped talking. Xiao Jinyu and Miss Han came forward to see the ceremony. My son, please send my regards to your mother. May your mother be blessed with peace and prosperity. Then he looked at Shen Shuwei, smiled and said, sister-in-law is fine too. Miss Han stepped forward and knelt down. The daughter of the people pays her respects to the queen and the crown princess. The queen waved her sleeves, get up. Thank you, Queen. Miss Han stood up from the ground and stood next to Xiao Jinyu. This was the second time the queen met Miss Han. The first time she met her was when she went to Qiancheng Hall. At first she thought she was a maid, but later she found out that Yu had brought her back from outside the palace. Standing next to her son, even though she is a little shorter than him, the girl is still too tall. The emperor rushed to Fenji Palace after the morning court. The emperor has arrived. In Eunuch Li's high-pitched voice, he stepped into Fenji Palace. The queen led them to salute the emperor. May your majesty be blessed. Everyone, Get up. The emperor took a few steps forward, helped the queen up, and sat down on the throne with her. The emperor saw the woman next to Xiao Jinyu at a glance. Because of her outstanding appearance and height, it was easy for others to spot her. It is not difficult to guess that this is the girl you wants to marry. You also sit down and talk. Thank you, Father. Xiao Jinyu and Miss Han sat down on the chairs on one side. The emperor had visited countless people, but he had never seen such a tall woman. He asked coldly, "Why is Miss Han so tall? Is there any other reason?" Xiao Jinyu explained, "Father, she is a barbarian from the north. Most of the women there are tall and tall." The emperor glared at his son. "Have I asked you?" Xiao Jinyu said, "My son's answer is the same." Miss Han secretly tugged on Xiao Jinyu's sleeve. She raised her head to look at the emperor and spoke slowly, "Back to the emperor, civilian girls were born in barbaric lands in the north. They eat rough things. Women who are tall can marry easily, but they are too petite. It's not easy to get married." Xiao Jinyu turned his head and looked at Miss Han. This was the first time he heard that tall women are easier to marry, and he found it a bit strange. The emperor of the northern barbarian land has heard that there are indeed rumors that the heroine is tall and tall. "Then why did you appear in Daxia?" "A relative at home fell ill and died, and the girl struggled to make a living, but was sold to Daxia by human traffickers." Before Miss Han finished speaking, Xiao Jinyu hurriedly answered, "Fortunately, I met my son. When I encountered injustice, I drew my sword to help and saved Miss Han. Otherwise, the consequences would be disastrous." Miss Han raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyu. Xiao Jinyu gave her a comforting smile, and his eyes seemed to say that it would be okay as long as he was there. The emperor looked at his son coldly. He hadn't married yet. He was trying to help him. What's the point of waiting for him to marry? The emperor turned to look at the queen. "What do you think of the queen?" The queen said calmly, "I listen to the emperor. If you likes it, then respect yours choice." "Emperor, you said you listened to me, but you still have to follow yours ideas." Xiao Jinyu heard the queen's words and said happily, "Father, the emperor, and mother, I think that the 15th day of next month is an auspicious day to get married. What do you think?" "Emperor." "Queen." Shen Shuwei didn't dare to say anything, but she still admired Xiao Jinyu in her heart. She even picked the date, which showed that she was already making plans before telling the emperor and empress. The emperor said angrily, "My parents ordered me to marry a matchmaker, but you haven't even written your horoscope, and your life has been settled." The queen tugged on the emperor's sleeves, looked at her son and said warmly, "As king you, getting married is not something that can be done in just 1 or 2 sentences. You have to let the Kintian supervisor calculate your fortune." Xiao Jinyu said, "I know this, so I came to ask you." The emperor said patiently, "The next 15 is too hasty. The autumn way hunting is just around the corner. We have to wait until the autumn way hunting comes back to discuss the wedding." Xiao Jinyu is not an unreasonable person. He naturally wants to have a grand wedding so that Miss Han can marry into the Qiancheng palace in style. "I will listen to my father, the emperor, and my empress." After saying that, he pulled Miss Han to stand up and both of them knelt on the ground. Both the emperor and the empress were startled by the sudden gift, and subconsciously shrank back. They knew Xiao Jinyu too well, and they would not give a big gift for anything. A big gift must be a request for something important. "Thank you, father, emperor and mother, for making this possible." The emperor understood that his son had done this on purpose. They had not yet clearly agreed to the marriage, so his son brought Miss Han to give her a big gift, which meant that they had agreed. Xiao Jinyu raised his head and said with a smile, "Father, emperor, and mother, should you give your future daughter-in-law some meeting gifts or something?" "Emperor." "Queen. The day of marriage has not yet come, and you start asking for wedding gifts? Moreover, The son asked for it on behalf of his future daughter-in-law. Can this son still ask for it? Shen Shuwei didn't know how much self-control she had to exert to prevent herself from laughing out loud. She was certain that Xiao Jinyu was a wife-slave and had not run away. The son had already spoken, but the queen could not let her son lose face, so she asked Qingying to go to the warehouse to get a set of hairpins and give them to Miss Han herself. This set of hairpins is my favorite set, and now I give it to you. Miss Han took it with both hands and thanked her verbally. Thank you, Queen. Xiao Jinyu said, you have to change your name to Queen Mother. Queen. The emperor saw that his son was really getting more and more aggressive, and he even asked for a meeting. Okay, I still have something to discuss with the queen, so please retreat first. My son, please retire. Xiao Jinyu took Miss Han out. Shen Shuwei also exited. As soon as they left, the emperor couldn't help but said, Queen, do you think this marriage is reliable? Look how protective you is even before she's married. How can she be so good after she's already married? The queen said, the emperor can't do it himself, why can't he let his son do it? The emperor hurriedly explained, Queen, I didn't mean that. What does that mean? Isn't it just that a husband shouldn't be so protective of his wife? The queen snorted, stood up and turned away. The emperor felt that he was wronged. He was obviously talking about his son, so why did he get involved? Who says he doesn't protect his wife? The aggrieved emperor saw his son returning and asked, why are you back again? Father, I am here to tell my father that we will take your future daughter-in-law with us during the Kaiowei hunting. Emperor. After his son left, the emperor heard the baby shouting, Daddy, hug. He stood up and came to the crib, and saw Susu awake and sitting next to his brother, holding his hand with her little hand, trying to wake him up. Seeing Grandpa Huang coming, she immediately let go of her brother's hand and reached out to Grandpa Huang for a hug. The emperor saw Susu smiling so sweetly, and the grievance he felt just now disappeared immediately, and he hugged Susu. It's better to be a granddaughter. It will only make Grandpa Huang happy. Susu hugged Grandpa Wang's neck, pouted and squeaked on Grandpa Wang's face. The emperor was startled for a moment, then laughed happily, hugged Susu and went to find the queen. Queen, Susu kissed me. At this time, Sinning Palace. The queen mother learned that in 2 days the emperor was going to go hunting in Kaiowei with his princes and courtiers. Seeing Wan Xian's virtuous appearance, she wanted to settle the marriage as soon as possible. Wan Xian, tidy up and let's go to the imperial study. Wan Xian nodded warmly, okay. There was still some distance between Sinning Palace and the royal study, so the queen mother went there in a sedan chair. When the emperor learned that the queen mother had come in person, he quickly put down the memorial in his hand and stood up to greet her. Mother, if you have anything to do, I can just go to Sinning Palace. Where can I let you go there in person? The emperor helped the queen mother to sit down on the chair. The queen mother raised her head and looked at the emperor, smiled and said, the emperor is busy with many things, how can he have so much free time? The AI family just has nothing to do, so it is time to relax. The emperor sat back on the dragon chair and asked in a gentle voice, then the queen came to me, did you have something important to do? The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 417. The queen mother couldn't bring it up directly, so she said it very tactfully, Emperor, isn't you still married? He's already 18, it's time for him to get married. Other princes of the same age as him have become fathers, so the emperor should remind him. The emperor heard this very familiar, because you reminded him of this yesterday. What the queen mother said makes sense. I've been thinking about this. The queen mother looked up at Wang Xin, took her hand, looked at the emperor, with a kind smile on her face. Wang Xin is gentle and virtuous, and considerate. I want to marry Wang Xin to you. What do you think? Wang Xin lowered her eyes, looking shy. The emperor knew that the Queen Mother's personal visit would definitely not be a trivial matter. It turned out that she wanted to find a husband for Wang Xin. Yu was unmarried, simple, and innocent, and a woman like Wang Xin was indeed suitable for Yu. However, Yu had just asked to marry Miss Han. It's not impossible to marry both at the same time. Mother, Yu is already 18 years old. Many things require his own wishes. Miss Wang Xin is indeed good, but we have to see if Yu agrees. The Queen Mother laughed happily. Yu must be willing. Yesterday, she personally sent Wang Xin back to Sining Palace. The two of them were talking and laughing. Which man doesn't love a girl like Wang Xin? The emperor saw the Queen Mother laughing so happily and felt it necessary to mention his son's request to marry Miss Han today. Mother, Yu has asked me to marry Miss Han as his principal wife. The Queen Mother's smile froze and asked in confusion, who is Miss Han? Wang Xin also raised her head and looked at the emperor, with a hint of surprise in her eyes. The emperor smiled and said, Miss Han was brought into the palace by Yu 2 years ago. They fell in love with each other over time, which led to today's proposal. The Queen Mother said worriedly, why did Yu bring so many people into the palace? Yu is simple-minded, and who knows what tricks Miss Han used. The emperor said, I am also worried about this, but Miss Han has been with Yu for more than 2 years and has been very well behaved. The Queen Mother asked, did the emperor agree to Yu's marriage with Miss Han? The emperor said, Mother, Yu has been spoiled since she was a child, and I also respect his choice. He likes Miss Han, so I won't interfere too much. The Queen Mother said earnestly, no matter what, you must marry a woman who knows you well as your principal wife. No one is more suitable than Wang Xin. What the Queen Mother said makes sense. The emperor couldn't refuse the Queen Mother's proposal. After pondering for a moment, he said, then how about I ask Yu? At this point, the Queen Mother nodded and agreed to the emperor's proposal. Then the emperor asks, Wang Xin is a rare good girl. The emperor sent the Queen Mother away and asked eunuchly to call Prince Yu over. When Xiao Jinyu came, the emperor was drinking tea to refresh himself. He often had trouble sleeping these days and was very sleepy during the day. Father, is there something you want me to do? The emperor put down his teacup and spoke slowly, it's not a big deal, it's just that the Queen Mother wants to give Miss Wang Xin to you. I want to ask you what you think. Xiao Jinyu was immediately unhappy when he heard this. Do I need to ask about this? I just asked for marriage from my father and mother today, and my father and mother agreed. How could I marry someone else as my concubine? The emperor looked at his son so excited. His temper was very similar to the queen, and he would get angry at the slightest thing. What I mean is that Miss Wang Xin is gentle and virtuous, considerate, and a good girl. You can marry both Miss Han and Miss Wang Xin. Xiao Jinyu also made his attitude clear, no matter how good Miss Wang Xin is, I only want to marry Miss Han. The emperor looked up at his son in front of him and stared at him for a long time until Xiao Jinyu was scared by his gaze. Father, why did the Empress Dowager assign that Wang Xin to me? Doesn't the Empress Dowager like Wang Xin very much? Wang Xin is gentle and considerate. Wouldn't it be good to keep her by your side and serve her? How could you bear to push Wang Xin away? Emperor. The girl is going to get married too. Xiao Jinyu began to speak well of Miss Han. Father, don't think Miss Han looks like an iceberg and snow lotus. That's just the surface. In fact, she is a very good person and very gentle. It's just that sometimes she is not very gentle. The emperor thought, what does Miss Han's gentleness have to do with me? If you marry a fierce woman, you will suffer, not me. Okay, let's discuss this matter after we come back from the autumn hunting. I have something important to do. You go back. Then I'll take my leave. Xiao Jinyu didn't stay long, because he had to go back to pack up and prepare for the autumn hunting. The Queen Mother had been waiting for the letter, and at night, she went to the emperor to ask about the result. The emperor was surprised to see the queen mother so concerned. It also showed that Wang Xin was very much liked by the queen mother. Otherwise, how could a commoner girl be so concerned? Emperor, what did you say? The emperor said tactfully, Mother, you said that Miss Wang Xin is indeed gentle, virtuous, and considerate, but he has already agreed to marry Miss Han, so he doesn't want to let Miss Wang Xin down. The queen mother was a little anxious. She had made the decision in front of Wang Xin and couldn't say that she couldn't do it. If you don't want to let Miss Wang Xin down, then marry Wang Xin as the principal wife. As for Miss Han, it's okay to be a concubine. The emperor nodded, Mother, the autumn hunting is coming soon. How about we discuss it after the autumn hunting is over? The queen mother paused after hearing this. Does you also want to go to the autumn hunting? The emperor said, well, Yu Hui will take Miss Han with him. The queen mother thought for a long time and suddenly suggested, then let Wan Xin go with you. It will just be a good time to cultivate some feelings. Maybe you will find out that Wan Xin is better than that girl Han and change her mind. The emperor raised his eyes to look at Wan Xin, not wanting to brush off the queen mother's kindness, so he nodded in agreement. There was a hunting trip in Kaiwei in 2 days. Chang Liangyuan got the news that concubine Su and Tao Liangyuan would follow, but she didn't get the news that she could go. Why can concubine Su and Tao Liangyuan go, but she can't? Seeing that the day was approaching, Chang Liangyuan couldn't sit still, got up and went to Fenji Palace. When I went there, I happened to see Shen Shuwei playing with her child. Didn't you realize that Shen Shuwei was so capable that he not only got Xiao Jinyan's exclusive favor, but also curried favor with the queen and moved into Fenji Palace? She stepped forward and said, Crown Princess. Shen Chu glanced at Chang Liangyuan lightly but said nothing. Chang Liangyuan snorted in her heart, isn't she the crown princess? What airs are you putting on? I'm here to see my aunt. I'm sorry to be with you. After Chang Liangyuan said that, she went to find the queen. The queen was watering the flowers in the garden. When she saw Chang Liangyuan coming, she said calmly, why are you here? Chang Liangyuan stepped forward and said, Aunt, I heard that my aunt is going hunting in Kaiwei. Lanner wants to accompany her so that she can take care of her. The queen said calmly, as long as you have this filial piety, I will have Qingying to take care of me. Chang Liangyuan said unwillingly, Aunt, Lanner can chat with her to relieve her boredom on the way. The queen was a little pleased to see the flowers blooming so well. She raised her head and looked at Chang Liangyuan, I won't feel bored if the princess and the others are on the road. Chang Liangyuan felt that the queen was becoming more and more indifferent to her, which must have been caused by Shen Shuwei's provocation in the middle. She stepped forward and took the queen's arm and said, Aunt, Lanner wants to go with you. The queen said, you are not in good health and are tired from the journey, so you should rest well in the palace. Chang Liangyuan felt a little dissatisfied when she saw that the queen was not getting enough of her. My aunt, who used to dote on me in every possible way, was so kind to outsiders. Susu should be awake now. I'm going to pick up my granddaughter. The queen put down the kettle and went to pick up her granddaughter. Chang Liangyuan stamped her feet angrily. Unwilling to give up, she turned around and went to Sining Palace. The queen mother had just gotten up from her nap when she saw Chang Liangyuan coming and said with a smile, Girl Lanner, the AI family knows that you are filial. You don't have to come here every day, the AI family understands. Grandma Huang is Lanner's biological grandmother. She came here because she likes it. Chang Liangyuan smiled with a smile on her face. Thinking of the hunting in Kaiwei, she pretended to be casual and said, Your Highness will go hunting in Kaiwei in 2 days, Lanner won't be able to see His Highness for a while. The Queen Mother did not hear the hidden meaning in Chang Liangyuan's words. She reassured, the hunting trip in Kaiwei only lasts half a month, and it will be over soon. Seeing that the Queen Mother didn't understand, Chang Liangyuan continued, That's what I said, but Lanner is a little reluctant to leave His Highness. It would be nice if we could be together every day. The Queen Mother saw Wan Xian busy with her business and reminded her quickly, Wan Xian, have you packed your things? Wan Xian smiled slightly and said, Queen Mother, I will take care of it later. When Chang Liangyuan heard this, she subconsciously thought that Wan Xian was leaving the palace, and she was secretly happy. Without Wan Xian, the Queen Mother's attention would be on her. Grandma Huang, is Miss Wan Xian leaving the palace? Lanner and Wan Xian have been together for a long time and have feelings for each other, and they are still a little reluctant to let go. The Queen Mother laughed when she heard this, I'm not leaving the palace, I'm going hunting in Kaiwei with me. I'll be back in about half a month, so don't be reluctant. Chang Liangyuan was stunned when she heard this, feeling extremely unbalanced. Even if concubine Su and Tao Liangyuan can go hunting in Kaiwei, why can even Wan Xian go with them? And she can't? She pretended not to care and asked, Grandma Huang, did the Emperor ask Wan Xian to follow you? P.S. Third update. Many babies ask Miss Han whether she is a boy or a girl. Why did Wan Xian fall in love with Xiao Jinyu again? There will be explanations later, and you can also guess. By the way, there must be a reason for this arrangement. The young master has been focusing on writing pet articles for 500 years. Good evening, babies. Acting coquettishly and cute, please give me monthly votes and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 418. The Empress Dowager said earnestly, it was the AI family who made a preamble to the Emperor that Wan Xian has no relatives around her. The AI family treats her as a granddaughter, so they naturally have to make plans for her. Chang Liangyuan felt even more unbalanced after hearing this. Her aunt was kind to Shen Shuwei, and the Queen Mother was also kind to Wan Xian. Why didn't anyone take her to heart? Could it be that everything he was good to her in the past was all fake? The Queen Mother noticed something was wrong with Chang Liangyuan and asked worriedly, Girl Lanner, what's wrong with you? Chang Liangyuan calmed down her extreme imbalance and smiled at the Queen Mother, Grandma Huang, Lanner is fine. I'm just worried that no one will be around to take good care of His Highness during the autumn hunting. Lanner even wants to go and serve His Highness personally. The Queen Mother smiled and said, you know how to think about the prince. Don't worry, it's not the first time that the prince has traveled far away. There is someone to take care of him. Chang Liangyuan couldn't help but roll her eyes in her heart. She had hinted so clearly, and it was not like she was an old fool, so she couldn't understand the meaning of her words. Finally, Chang Liangyuan left Sinuing Palace angrily. The day before the Kaiwei hunting, Xiao Jinyan took Shen Shuwei, his son and daughter, back to the East Palace. She was clearly in the palace, but Xiao Jinyan felt as if Xiaju had returned to her parents' home, and not seeing her for one day felt like March. This sentence was not true at all. When Xiao Jinyan picked up Shen Shuwei and the babies, the queen felt empty, as if her own daughter had been picked up by her son-in-law. Fortunately, I will go hunting in Kaiwei tomorrow. The babies were held by the nanny, so Shen Shuwei didn't have to worry. She looked at Xiao Jinyan expectantly, Your Highness, have you prepared a riding outfit for me? After not seeing each other for 2 days, Xiao Jinyan found that her little face was rounder again. I'm afraid she spent a lot of time eating and drinking with her mother these days. Ready, you can try it later. Shen Shuwei's eyebrows curled up happily when he heard this. I know that His Highness is so attentive, and he will definitely remember to prepare riding clothes for me. Daddy, Daddy, hug. Xiao Jinyan heard the babies call behind him, and turned around to see Susu reaching out for him to hug her. She had cute eyes that were watery as if she could talk, and a round and pink face that made her want to pinch it a few times. No matter how many times I see this gesture of reaching out for a hug, my heart becomes soft like a marshmallow. Susu's mouth looks exactly like yours, he said, striding over and hugging Susu. Shen Shuwei looked back at the father and daughter, his eyes falling on his daughter. What's wrong with looking like me? Look how cute Susu is. The group returned to the East Palace in a grand manner. As soon as she returned to Hehuan Hall, Shen Shuwei saw a red and black riding outfit on the table, and couldn't wait to pick it up and try it on. Xiao Jinyan walked in with Susu in his arms and saw Shen Shuwei going behind the screen to change clothes. He held his daughter and sat down on the couch. Susu played with the white jade accessories on Xiao Jinyan's lapel. Daddy, Daddy. Xiao Jinyan chuckled, isn't my father here? Shen Shuwei changed into her riding clothes and walked out from behind the screen, deliberately turning around in front of Xiao Jinyan. Your Highness, how is it? The riding outfit is slimmer and more convenient, and can fully show off Xiaoju's figure. The Xiaoju at this time is completely different from the Xiaoju who wore men's clothes 2 years ago. The curvy figure is more and more feminine. Xiaoju's skin is as fair as snow. No matter what color of clothes she wears, she will look very good. He praised without hesitation, it looks great. When Susu saw Shen Shuwei, she clapped her hands and shouted, Mama, Mum. Xiao Jinyan lowered his head and glanced at his daughter. Seeing her dancing happily, he chuckled, even Susu praised your beauty. Shen Shuwei was very happy when she heard this. She looked at Susu in Xiao Jinyan's arms and suddenly thought of an important question. Your Highness, let's go hunting in Kaiwei, what will happen to the babies? Xiao Jinyan said, the babies are too young to travel far away. Let the nanny take care of them in the palace. Don't worry, I will send more people to prevent anything from happening to the babies. This is the only way. Shen Shuwei looked at Susu, took her little hand and said, tomorrow, the father and mother will go on a long trip. Don't always chew on your brother's face, and don't disturb your brother when he sleeps, you know? Susu looked at Shen Shuwei with a confused look on her face and pouted, Mama, Moma. Shen Shuwei added, my father and mother will be back soon. The next day, Shen Shuwei said goodbye to the babies and followed Xiao Jinyan into the carriage. Concubine Su and Tao Liangyuan also got on the carriage, but it was another carriage. The queen got on the carriage and realized that she had been tricked by the dog emperor. She thought she was riding in the same carriage as the crown princess, but it turned out that she was riding in the same carriage as the dog emperor. She looked dissatisfied at the dog emperor in the carriage, who was leisurely drinking tea. I would like to share a carriage with the crown princess. The emperor said earnestly, Queen, the husband and wife have been separated for a few days. It's rare that the babies are not around. Why don't you let them get along with each other more? In fact, what the emperor wants to say is that maybe we haven't been alone together for a long time, shouldn't we take this opportunity to get along well? The queen was stunned when she heard this, thinking of the positive look of the crown prince when he came to pick up the crown princess yesterday, and the happy look of the crown princess. It seemed that the young couple should be given some separate space. It's okay, it will be the same when she and the crown princess live in the same camp when they get to the paddock. The emperor handed the newly brewed tea to the queen and said, Queen, have some tea. The queen glanced at the teacup in front of her, hesitated for a while, then reached out to take it. She happened to be thirsty and took a few sips to moisten her throat. As if by magic, the emperor took out jars of candied fruit from the carriage, placed them in front of the queen, and then opened them one by one. This is the candied fruit prepared by the imperial chef. Eat some to prevent vomiting. The queen looked at the jars of candied fruits in front of her, which she used to love. She raised her eyes to look at the dog emperor, not expecting that he would be so attentive. The emperor is interested. The emperor could feel that the queen was in a good mood, so he tried to move closer to the queen. You should, try it. The queen took a piece of candied fruit and put it into her mouth. Because it was a little sour, she ate it slowly. The emperor lowered his eyes and looked at her, feeling as if he was back before they were married. Concubine Su and Tao Liangyuan went hunting in Kaiwei for the first time. They leaned on the window excitedly from the moment they got on the carriage, watching the carriage drive out of the palace gate and onto the bustling street. Concubine Su was extremely excited. I'm finally out of the palace, and the air feels fresh. Yes, we haven't left the palace for a long time. It's thanks to the crown princess that we have a chance to come out. Tao Liangyuan poked her head outside and looked around, because there were several shops on this street owned by her family. Seeing the words Tao's grain store written on it, Tao Liangyuan waved her hands excitedly. I saw my family's grain store. Concubine Su was excited but also a little disappointed. I can't see the front door of my house. Tao Liangyuan turned to look at Concubine Su and consoled her. I can wait until you leave the palace. That's right. Concubine Su's mood improved immediately. She suddenly became greedy when she looked at the various snacks on the street vendors. There was another person who was greedy, and that was Shen Shuwei. She was lying on the window, looking at the various snacks on the street, and she was so greedy. She turned to look at Xiao Jinyan, moved her body closer, and looked at him aggrievedly. Your Highness, have you forgotten something important? Xiao Jinyan pretended not to know. Really? What's the matter? Shen Chu hinted slightly. Your Highness, you have said before that as long as I wish, Your Highness will be satisfied. Really? Xiao Jinyan's arms still held her slender waist, and he brought her into his arms with force, and whispered into her ear, Xiao Ju wants it now. Shen Chuwei only felt her ears itching a little, and her whole body felt as if she was sober. Thinking of delicious food, she tried to stay awake. No, I don't mean that. The snowball on the side couldn't bear to look at it, and buried his head in his arms, out of sight. Xiao Jinyan chuckled. What does that mean? Shen Chuwei said with some dissatisfaction, we have been husband and wife for so long, how come your Highness doesn't have any tacit understanding at all? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 419. Shen Chuwei feels that after a husband and wife have been together for a long time, they can guess what the other person is thinking with every look and gesture. This is called tacit understanding. She had hinted so clearly, but Xiao Jinyan still couldn't tell that she wanted to satisfy her craving for the delicious food on the street. Your Highness doesn't understand my concubine at all. Xiao Jinyan looked at the angry Xiao Ju. He was not annoyed, but asked in a low voice, does Xiao Ju know me? Of course I know that His Highness has misophobia, has no interest in food, is concerned about Daxia, and wants to make a career. After Shen Chuwei finished speaking, she looked at Xiao Jinyan proudly. Xiao Jinyan asked, that's all? Shen Chu was slightly stunned. She suddenly thought of the portrait and the jade stone in the dark room. Maybe she didn't know Xiao Jinyan well enough. Your Highness has a secret in his heart, but he doesn't want to tell me. Xiao Jinyan was stunned. Did Xiaju really know that he could read minds? He just didn't tell her the secret. As for those years as a proton, it wasn't a secret, he just didn't want to mention it. Shen Chuwei added, actually, everyone has secrets in their hearts that cannot be told. She also has a secret. If it is accidentally exposed in the future and Xiao Jinyan questions her, she will have the confidence to refute it. Xiao Jinyan nodded in agreement. It's hard for you to be so considerate. Shen Chu chuckled slightly. These are what I should do. I hope that your Highness can be so considerate in the future. Xiao Jinyan chuckled. That's natural. Shen Chu slightly stretched out his finger. Your Highness, let's pull the hook and keep our word. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at her slender little fingers, looking at the successful look on her face, and vaguely guessed that this was a trap. Your Highness, Shen Chuwei ignored everything and took his hand, hooking his little fingers with his little fingers, smiling proudly, "We have an agreement." Xiao Jinyan stared at the two little fingers hooked together in front of her and her proud and happy smile. Several pictures flashed through her mind, overlapping with the picture in front of her. Shen Shuwei noticed Xiao Jinyan staring at her without saying a word, and waved her hand in front of him, "Your Highness." Xiao Jinyan watched the scene in front of him return to reality, and he had a lot of doubts in his heart. He always felt that through Xiaju, some fragments would always flash through his mind. "Do you have a secret to hide from me?" Shen Shuwei shook his head vigorously. "The secret of the time traveler must never be told." Xiao Jinyan looked at her with a guilty look on her face. It was clear that she was hiding a secret from him. At this time, Qin Xiao's voice came from outside the carriage, "Master, I have bought something." Xiao Jinyan looked away and raised his hand to lift the curtain. Qin Xiao brought in a bag of things. He took it and lowered the curtain. Shen Shuwei saw the bamboo sticks of candied haws with his eyes and smelled the aroma of meat cakes. This bag was full of food. "Your Highness, I think we have a good understanding." When Xiao Jinyan looked at Shen Shuwei, he saw her staring longingly at the oiled paper bag in her hand. He said helplessly, "It's not unfair at all to say that my daughter looks like you. Susu, like Xiaju, is particularly interested in food. She weighs more than her brother and has a chubby face. As long as my son looks like his Highness," Shen Shuwei said as she took the oil paper bag from Xiao Jinyan's hand and opened it to see that there was a lot of food inside. Xiao Jinyan asked, "My son is sleepy, is he like me?" Shen Chu took a bite of the meat pie, puffed out his cheeks and said, "My son is very smart, just like your Highness." Xiao Jinyan chuckled, "Can children who haven't arrived in August be smart or not?" Shen Shuwei said while eating the meat pie, "With a father as smart as you, my son will only be better than his predecessors." "Your Highness, rest assured, my son will only be smarter." Xiao Jinyan shook his head helplessly. He took out the tea set and tea leaves, and slowly made tea. Shen Chu gnawed on the meat pie and looked at Xiao Jinyan who was making tea. His every move showed the prince's elegance and nobility. Xiao Jinyan picked up the teapot and poured a cup of hot tea in front of her. "Drink some tea to relieve the greasiness." "Thank you, Your Highness." Shen Chu was slightly thirsty. He picked up the teacup and took a few sips to moisten his throat. Xiao Jinyan looked at her drinking tea and eating meat cakes, imagining her appearance as a child, and her childhood appearance automatically appeared in his mind, overlapping with the angry portrait again. He suddenly asked, "Have you ever been to Nanzhao Kingdom when you were a child?" Shen Shuwei subconsciously asked, "Where is Nanzhao Kingdom?" After asking, she was stunned. Xiao Jinyan should have asked about the original owner. How did she know if the original owner had been there? Memories are blurry, like paste. Xiao Jinyan said, "Nanzhao Kingdom is far away from Daxia and is also very powerful." After Shen Shuwei finished eating the meat pie, he wiped his mouth with those handkerchiefs. "Is it better than Daxia?" Xiao Jinyan paused. Nanzhao was naturally stronger than Daxia, otherwise he wouldn't have had to be a hostage when he was a child. He nodded. Shen Shuwei picked up the candied haws and bit into one. "His Highness will definitely make Daxia stronger in the future, and no one will dare to bully him." Xiao Jinyan raised the corners of his lips and said, "Yes." Shen Shuwei ate the candied haws in her mouth and saw that there were tea fruits in it. She suddenly thought of the queen, Su concubine, and the others, but the queen should have nothing to worry about if the emperor has food. "By the way, Your Highness, have concubine Su and the others bought anything to eat?" Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei. "I will send someone to buy it." Xiao Jinyan lifted the curtains of the car and ordered, "I'm going to buy 2 copies of the same delicacy and send them to concubine Su." "I obey your command." Qin Xiao was about to turn his horse around when Xiao Jinyan called him again. "Buy 2 more copies and send them to the Queen and Prince Yu." "I obey your command." Qin Xiao pulled the reins and turned to buy food. After walking through the bustling streets, the excitement of concubine Su and Tao Lianyuan also subsided. The two were bored, holding the storybooks and leaning in the carriage to read leisurely. Tao Lianyuan, I don't know where the crown princess got so many storybooks from. The more I read, the more I liked them. Concubine Su, yes, I have never seen such a beautiful storybook, which is much better than those storybooks of rich ladies and poor scholars. It's a bit strange. Why are so many storybooks different from ours? The new names and service etiquette are completely different, Tao Lianyuan said with curiosity. Concubine Su said, I'm curious, too, but it's just good looking. At this time, Qin Xiao's voice came from outside the carriage, Concubine Su. Concubine Su lifted the curtain in confusion and saw that it was Qin Xiao. What's the matter? Qin Xiao handed 2 oil paper bags to Concubine Su. This is for Concubine Su and Tao Lianyuan. Concubine Su took the oil paper bags and gave one to Tao Lianyuan. She opened them with doubts and was very excited when she saw the food. It's food. It must be the crown princess who asked Qin Xiao to buy it. Tao Lianyuan was also very excited when she saw the food. We benefited from the crown princess. Qin Xiao, who had not walked far, was a little confused. He didn't say that it was an order to send it. How could everyone think that the crown princess ordered it? Compared to the lively atmosphere in Concubine Su's carriage, the emperor's carriage was very quiet. The queen felt a little bored. She couldn't find anyone to chat with. Looking at the dog emperor, he always looked at her with his beautiful phoenix eyes, and felt uncomfortable all over. She simply turned her head and lifted the curtain to look outside. At this time, she had already left the city gate. There were no more vendors shouting, and it was much quieter. When the emperor saw this scene, he thought that the queen had been bored in the palace for a long time, and it was rare for her to go out of the palace to breathe, so she would look outside from time to time. The queen was annoyed with the dog emperor, and saw Qin Xiao suddenly running over, and saw him handing her an oil paper bag. Queen, this is what the prince asked his subordinates to send. The queen took the oil paper bag from him, opened it, and found that it was food. She was so happy that she couldn't close her mouth. The crown princess is really thoughtful. Qin Xiao was confused. He was talking about His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, so why did the queen hear it as the crown princess? At this time, Xiao Jinyu was holding a folding fan to fan Miss Han, with peach blossom eyes curved and a very attentive smile. Miss Han, do you still feel hot? Miss Han drank the new tea that Xiao Jinyu had just brewed, and said lightly, it's not hot anymore. Xiao Jinyu remembered that she had taken Miss Han on a long journey with her 2 years ago, and she would have symptoms of motion sickness when riding in a carriage. The carriage is bumpy. If you feel uncomfortable, tell me and we'll pull over to rest. Miss Han looked up at Xiao Jinyu. Since he decided to marry her, Xiao Jinyu's attitude has been completely different from before. He treated her well before, and now he treats her even better. Xiao Jinyu touched his face in confusion. Is there something dirty on my face? No. Miss Han saw that Xiao Jinyu's forehead was full of sweat, so she raised her handkerchief to wipe it for him, just a little sweat. Xiao Jinyu bent her peach blossom eyes. Do you like little rabbits? Miss Han nodded, yes. Xiao Jinyu immediately became energetic. Buy one when we get to the paddock later, I'll catch one for you. Sister-in-law's is a male, so let's raise a female, just the right pair. Miss Han. Xiao Jinyu came closer and sniffed the fragrance on Miss Han's body. He had wanted to ask for a long time, Miss Han, did you put on rouge and powder today? Every time I get close to you, I find that you smell so good. Miss Han lowered her head and smelled it, her tone full of doubts. I never use rouge and powder, how can there be a fragrance? Really? Xiao Jinyu got closer and pressed against her neck, and found that the fragrance was stronger. It smells so good. Xiao Jinyu couldn't help kissing her. As soon as he touched her, he heard Qin Xiao's voice coming from outside the carriage, "Prince Yu." Xiao Jinyu frowned. Why did he have to shout at any time? He raised his hand to lift the curtain and saw Qin Xiao. "Is there something important to say?" Qin Xiao was stunned for a moment. "Prince Yu, it's not important." Xiao Jinyu said unhappily, "It's not important, why are you calling me?" Qin Xiao hurriedly raised the oil paper bag in his hand. "This is what the prince asked his subordinates to send to Prince Yu." "Prince brother," Xiao Jinyu reached out to take it, opened it, and found that it was all food. He smiled and said, "It must be my sister-in-law who asked the prince brother to send it." "Qin Xiao, why do you think it was the idea of the crown princess?" When Xiao Jinyu handed the oil paper bag in his hand to Miss Han, he found that Miss Han was looking at him and smiling. He was stunned for a moment. After being together for so long, he rarely saw Miss Han smile. "What are you laughing at?" "The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 420. Miss Han was laughing just now because Xiao Jinyu was interrupted when he wanted to kiss her, showing an irritable mood, like a little wolf dog. "Nothing, what did Guard Qin bring?" Eat. Xiao Jinyu took out the items in the oil paper bag one by one as if offering a treasure. When he saw the hot meat pie, he handed it directly to Miss Han. "This is meat pie. My sister-in-law loves it the most. If she thinks it's delicious, it must be delicious. If you don't believe me, try it." Miss Han lowered her eyes and looked at the meat pie in his hand. It smelled really good. She reached out to take it and looked up at Xiao Jinyu. "Do you trust the crown princess so much?" Xiao Jinyu answered readily, "Of course, my sister-in-law is very knowledgeable about food." "Let me try it." Miss Han looked down at the hot meatloaf in her hand, and took a bite out of curiosity. The meatloaf was crispy on the outside and spicy on the inside. It was said that the meatloaf actually contained a lot of green peppers, and the meat accounted for less portion, but tastes good. When Xiao Jinyu saw her eating, he asked, "Is it delicious?" "It tastes good." Miss Han raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyu, passing the meat pie in her hand. "Do you want to try it?" Seeing that she ate so deliciously, Xiao Jinyu became a little greedy. He raised the meatloaf in front of him and opened his mouth to take a bite without being polite. He had eaten meatloaf many times and found that the meatloaf he ate this time was the most delicious. After Qin Xiao finished delivering the things, he drove his horse to the maid's carriage, raised his hand and knocked on the window. Happy spring. Chengzi was taking a nap when she heard someone calling her. She opened her eyes and lifted the car curtain, and saw Qin Xiao on the horse. "What's wrong?" Qin Xiao took out the oil paper bag from his arms and handed it over. "This is for you." Chengzi took the oil paper bag from his hand with doubts, and found that it was still warm. When she opened it, the aroma was fragrant, and she found a few meat patties inside. "I haven't eaten in a long time, but I really want to eat it." Chengzi took out a piece of meat pie and handed it out. "You can eat one too." Qin Xiao shook his head. "Don't worry about me, you can eat it yourself." Chengzi looked outside and saw that Qin Xiao was a guard. It was really not okay to eat openly, so he said nothing. Qin Xiao took out another bunch of candied haws and handed it over. "Girls should all like to eat candied haws. For you." Chengzi's eyes lit up when she saw the candied haws on a stick. "You also bought the candied haws on a stick?" Yes. Qin Xiao drove his horse to keep up with the carriage, and presented the candied haws in his hand to Chun 11. Chengzi shyly reached out and took it. Wei Qi turned around and saw this scene. He said to Lu Zaiyan, "I didn't realize that Qin Xiao is quite good at making girls happy." When Lu Zaiyan heard this, he looked back and saw Qin Xiao's stern face with a smile that was rare to see in 800 years. "This is what a man is in love, and so is your highness." There was no need for Qin Tianji, unlike Lu Zaiyan, to follow him during the hunting in Kaiwei. This time, he took the initiative to follow him, mainly because he felt bored staying in the palace and wanted to go out for a walk. After Lu Zhayan mentioned this, Wei Qi, one of the personal guards, also discovered that his master had changed a lot in the past 2 years, and he would occasionally see his master smile inexplicably. "Sometimes I feel very happy, sometimes I feel very bad." Lu Zhayan joked, "The same will happen when you fall in love." Wei Qi sighed, "I'll forget it." Lu Zhayan asked, "What's wrong?" Wei Qi said, "Didn't you say that I might be childless? Then I might as well stay single so as not to drag down other people's girls." Lu Zhayan almost forgot about this incident, and comforted him, "Good men like you are rare." Wei Qi. Chengzi took out a piece of meat pie and ate it in small bites. The maid on the side looked at Chao Chengzi with envy and jealousy at the same time. "Chengzi, what's your relationship with Guard Qin? Why is he so nice to you? Chengzi, tell me quickly, is Qin Xiao your lover?" Chengzi raised her head and was about to explain when she heard someone say something strange. "Is there any need to guess? Their relationship is obvious from the beginning. They will definitely be courteous in all kinds of ways in the beginning, just to take advantage. Girls still need to love themselves, otherwise, if they get tired of being played by men, they will stop crying." "There is no place to cry." The person who spoke was Duckweed, the maid who did the chores. "Is it your turn to make irresponsible remarks about my relationship with Guard Qin?" Chengzi looked up and down at the maid opposite. She was wearing the clothes of a palace maid, but she was of a lower rank and had a sharp and mean face. No wonder she spoke so bitter. "I didn't realize it. You were deceived emotionally by a scumbag at such a young age. It's really pitiful. Please remember better next time so you don't get deceived again." Chengzi is petite and delicate, and seems to be easy to bully, but in fact she is not that easy to bully. Duckweed immediately became unhappy after hearing this. "What do you mean by that?" "I'm kindly reminding you, don't be ungrateful." The maid on the side reminded her kindly, "Duckweed, she is the maid in charge of the crown princess. If you mess with her, you won't be able to eat her." When Duckweed heard that she was the eldest lady in charge of the affairs of the crown princess, she knew she was not to be offended and did not dare to touch her head on. She was just mentally unbalanced. "What's so great about the lady in charge? She's just riding in the same carriage as us." Chengzi took a bite of the meat pie, raised her chin and said, "The lady in charge is nothing special, at least she doesn't have to do rough work." Duckweed's job every day was to wash clothes, which made her feel even more unbalanced. She was also a maid, so why did she have endless clothes to wash every day, while Chengzi could eat and drink well? Wan Xian sat in the corner and looked at the scene in front of her calmly, knowing that identity was important. It was late afternoon when we arrived at the paddock. This was Shen Chuwei's second time here, and the layout of the opposite side was quite familiar, no different from 2 years ago. The tent had been set up in advance, and Shen Chuwei followed Xiao Jinyan all the way to their tent. Xiao Jinyan ordered, "Qin Xiao, sprinkle some realgar near the camp." "I obey my orders." Qin Xiao took the order and went to do the work. Xiao Jinyan looked back at Shen Chuwei and saw that she was sorting the packages with Chengzi. She was actually thinking about her food. "If you are tired, you can go in and rest for a while." Shen Chu stretched slightly and said, "I'm a little sleepy. I'll go take a nap first." Xiao Jinyan nodded. The bed has been made, and Shen Chuwei can sleep after taking off his clothes. After sleeping for an hour, Shen Chuwei was woken up by thirst. There was no one in the tent, and even Chengzi didn't know where he was. She got up and poured herself a cup of herbal tea. After drinking 2 cups to satisfy her thirst, she put on her clothes and came out of the tent. I happened to see Xiao Jinyu coming out of the tent. When he saw her, he waved to her. "Sister-in-law." Shen Chuwei walked over with curiosity. "Where are you planning to go?" Xiao Jinyu said, "I'm going to catch rabbits, and I'll catch a female, which will match yours. Shen Shuwei couldn't help but laugh out loud. They are still paired? If you have a little rabbit and you can't eat it, it's better not to raise it. She planned to grill and stir-fry the round rabbit at home. Ever since Xiao Jinyan got angry after discussing with Xiao Jinyan how to eat it, she didn't dare to think about the rabbit. You can't hurt your harmony because of a rabbit, right? She can roast a whole lamb and eat it? Xiao Jinyu nodded in agreement. Sister-in-law is right, but a male and a female can be companions, otherwise it will be too lonely. Shen Shuwei said he had no objection. That's okay. At this time, a gentle female voice came from behind. Crown Princess, King Yu. Shen Chu turned around slightly doubtfully and saw Wan Xian walking towards the side. Wan Xian felt blessed, and she raised her gentle eyes to look at Xiao Jinyu. The women of the people have nothing to do. If King Yu has something to do, he can ask the women of the people to do it. Xiao Jinyu was a little surprised when he saw Wan Xian. Aren't you waiting for Grandma Huang? Why are you here in the paddock? The Queen Mother asked the daughter to come here. Wan Xian asked doubtfully, where is King Yu going? Xiao Jinyu was a little excited. I'm going to catch rabbits. Miss Han likes rabbits. When Shen Shuwei thought about catching a rabbit, she thought of the scene when Xiao Jinyan gave her a rabbit. She naively thought that the rabbit was kept for her to eat, but she didn't expect that it was kept as a pet. Wan Xian said with some regret, the rabbit is so cute, isn't it a little cruel? Shen Shuwei said, are wild rabbits as cute as pet rabbits? Xiao Jinyu asked a question on his forehead, do you think it's cruel? Wan Xian nodded, the folk girl just thinks it's too bloody. Xiao Jinyu said, then what are you doing in the paddock? You know that the prey in the paddock are all raised by the royal family, just for hunting. You can't come to the paddock even if you don't want to see bloody people. Wan Xian said softly, folk women don't hunt, so they are not afraid. Shen Shuwei couldn't help but ask, you don't usually eat meat, right? Wan Xian said doubtfully, eat, what's wrong? Shen Chu said slightly, you are so kind-hearted. Do you feel guilty every day after eating pork, beef, and venison? Xiao Jinyu also echoed, you are so kind-hearted, and to be honest, you are suitable for eating vegetarian food. Shen Shuwei said, I don't like meat and I can't eat vegetarian food. Wan Xian also realized that she had gone too far, so she promptly made up for it, it's not as exaggerated as what you said. Meat girls still eat it? Xiao Jinyu said, then why do you say catching rabbits is too cruel? Wang Xinyano said, the civilian girl is just a little scared. Xiao Jinyu asked again, there are roast rabbits, roast pheasants, wild robes and other game tonight. Do you dare to eat them?